right, everyone. How you doing? Welcome back to the Words from the Wise podcast. My name is still Gary Wise. I am the host. I am the person that gets the chance to share this time with you. That the people that listen to the podcast, people that tune into the YouTube channel. Super exciting right now. As of this day that I'm filming, we've crossed over 550 subscribers on YouTube. We're closing in on over 2,000 downloads on the MP3 podcast or the online audio podcast. And it's just super exciting. I thank you all very much for taking the time to share in the journey of life, to follow, to subscribe, to share with your friends. If there's ever anything you'd like to talk about, or if there's ever anything in particular you'd like me to discuss, just let me know. I'm super excited to continue to film these videos and to just share life with you all. Today, the story for today's podcast is going to be a little more of a context builder, another story out of my background, my personal journey, some of the things that, or one of the things that made me who I am today. Right, a lot of you know that I am a retired U.S. Navy Master Chief, Command Master Chief. A lot of you know I am a high school teacher now that teaches Navy Junior ROTC, and I live in Ocala, Florida. I'm a husband to my wife, Erica. We've been blessed to be married since 2002. We've been together since 2001. And then I'm a dad. You know, I've got an 18-year-old son and I have an 11-year-old son. But not a lot of people know about my background, I would say, previous to all of that. So one of the stories I'm going to share, or the story for today, is going to be me sharing the story of my little sister, Christina, right? And of course, I'm going to be sharing it from my perspective. And there's nuance to that because, you know, people have opinions. But this is going to be my version of what I remember about not just my little sister, but how God played a role in my life and a pivotal moment in her life. I was adopted at birth, right? I was born to a teenage mother who was not able to have a child, like to keep the baby. I was born 3.5 months early, and I weighed like 3 pounds when I was born, which is going to be a whole separate video about my birth story and how that's affected my life. But I was adopted by my mom and dad, Gary and Nyla Wise, they got me about 2 months after I was born because I had to stay in the hospital in the NICU for a couple of months, right? And then 3.5 years later, my parents, Gary and Nyla, my mom was not able to have children of her own due to some medical complications she had while she was a Navy spouse. My dad did about 8 years in the Navy on active duty. He went from being an undesignated seaman to being a hospital corpsman. He eventually rose to the rank of petty officer, second class, hospital corps. And my mom was having a bunch of medical complications, and it was not conducive to her, I'd say, mental health and spiritual health and physical health for him to continue on with the service. And so they made the decision for him to get a discharge out of the Navy and to be full-time, to be able to be with her, which is really what they both needed to do. A big part of their goal for the future was to have a family. And back in the 70s, early 80s, my dad said he did not have the opinion that the adoption agencies looked at military families as being good opportunities for adoptions to be placed. So he felt like they would be better, more advantageously situated for adoption if they were no longer in the service. So there was multiple reasons why they wanted to let the Navy go and get back to Utah and be near family. So they adopted me 1977. I was their first. And then 4 years later, they adopted my little sister, Kristi. You know, and we have a great family. You know, I was again 4 years older than my little sister, right? Which it's interesting because my little sister and my wife are almost exact same age, a month apart, right? She was born in September of '81. Erica was born in October of '81. Great family. At the time, we lived in Tooele, Utah. And my dad was a paramedic at the time at the Twilla Army Depot. And we were there until I got through with kindergarten. So I was probably about 6 years old. Christina was about 2. We moved down to Arizona because my dad decided he wanted to go to DeVry, which was essentially an electronic technical school that would hold. My dad was in medicine, right? He was a nurse. He was a hospital corpsman. He became a paramedic. He became an LPN, but he was not happy in medicine. It really was not what he wanted to do with his life. It was just kind of what he felt like he got boxed into from his time in the service. And my dad, looking at the future, he saw that computers, again, early 80s, about 1983, computers were going to be the way to go, right? And so my dad decides, hey, I'm going to move my family down to Phoenix, Arizona. We're going to sell this house that we bought brand new in Tooele that my parents had built. I remember it being just, I've never lived in a better house, unfortunately, with my family, with my parents ever again. This was like the place they wanted to be. But unfortunately, my dad did not have the education that he wanted to get into the career field that he wanted to get into, which was hopefully going to be not medicine, right? And he was interested in technology. He was interested in computers. Moved down to Arizona. And I remember my dad working 2 jobs all the time, going to school full time, us living in apartments. And we were down in Arizona for about 2 years. I did first grade, I did second grade in Arizona. I moved every year. I went to a different school every grade from kindergarten all the way to 7th grade. Something about my family, something about my dad and my mom, there was just always a need to be moving. We were never settled for whatever the reason. Either my dad just didn't like the area we were in, and each time he would get us there, and then he would realize that was not where he wanted to be, or a job would change, something would happen, right? So the first year we were in Phoenix, the second year we were in Peoria. Not a lot of family down there. My Aunt Sherry was down there with her family. So and that matters because in my family, we would do a lot of stuff on the weekends with my cousins and my aunts and my uncles. And so that was kind of a geographic change to having people in our I would say, in our circle. After 2 years of being in Arizona, my grandpa got sick. He'd been having heart problems since way before I was born. And something significantly had happened while he was on a trip down to Arizona to visit with us and with my Aunt Sherry's family. And I remember my dad had to travel with him back to Utah to get him home. And it was a big deal because my dad was going on an airplane. And for me, again, I never rode on an airplane until I joined the Navy. So for me to have my dad going on an airplane at about 8 years old, it was a significant event. And when he came back from that trip to take my grandpa back home, we were then making plans to go back to Utah. And I remember my dad telling me as I got older that as he got ready to graduate from DeVry, all the jobs that were being offered in the technology field or in the computer field that my dad wanted to get into were going to be not in Arizona, not in Utah. And my dad did not want to get away from his parents. He was worried about his dad. He was worried about his mom. My dad was the oldest of 5 kids, right? My mom is one of 9 kids. So my mom had a very big family as well. They were out of Colorado. My dad's family was also originally out of Colorado, but they all transplanted over to Utah after my Aunt Susie met my Uncle Tom, and they decided to start their family. That was in Utah, in Alpine, Utah, and my grandma and grandpa decided they were going to move to Utah to be closer to the church. All of my family are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they all wanted to be closer to that religious community, right? Let's be honest, that's what it was about. And my dad and my mom wanted to be close to that as well, I believe. It was not worth it to them to move to where the computer technology jobs are going to be located. and to be farther away from where my dad felt like his responsibilities were drawing him back to. But the challenge was in Utah, my dad did not seem to be able to find any jobs that would leverage or use his technology training. And so not only did he now have this technology education that he wasn't finding jobs for, but he also was in debt because he didn't pay for the training up front. He took up student loans and now he had to pay those loans back. And this matters because I'm going to watch my dad pay these loans until I'm 16 years old. I still remember the day my dad told me that he made his last payment to his student loans at the age of 16. Mind you, he started the education at the DeVry Technology Training location when I was in first grade. So that's a lot of years of him paying a monthly payment to repay these loans for something he never did for an employment opportunity. We got back to Utah, and I remember the first job my dad took was working at the mental institution down in Provo, working with people, elderly, mentally impaired people, right? And I remember coming back to Utah. My sister at that point, around 4 or 5 years old, I'm 8, 9 years old, and my sister and my mom were already finding areas of friction with other people in the family. My mom and my grandma didn't always get along, which is fine. It's kind of how things go. And then my sister and my mom were having friction. I'm not sure if it's just a mother-daughter thing. I'm not sure. I mean, there was times that me and my mom had friction as well. So that's a whole different reality. Probably we all have to deal with that. Me not raising daughters, that's one challenge I've not seen. But I do know a lot of my friends that are women happen to have complicated relationships with their moms, right? It's fine. But life was good. Went through a couple more years, moved a couple more times. Eventually, I end up leaving home around 15 years old. 15 years old, I decide that I'm done going to high school at that point. And so what happened with that was I got in trouble in the local high school because of the people that I was running around with, and they basically said, we no longer want Gary to go to our high school. He can go to a secondary high school where they put the kids that kind of get into trouble. I walked into that school one day, saw people that I knew I wasn't going to get along with, and basically just told my parents, I'm not going to that school. I'm just going to get in trouble there, even worse. I don't know what I'm going to do. My parents said, well, you can't just drop out. You got to figure something out. So they enrolled me in community college. That was when I got the opportunity. I did 2 classes. One was a typing class and one was a history class. I went to the typing class every day. And to this day, I credit that typing class to my ability to type on a keyboard, right? That class and my time as a Navy recruiter. And then the history class, I never went to the class. I would literally just go to the student lounge, go to sleep, and wasted my parents' money. And I just did not value the money that they had spent on me, that investment. I was a jerk. I'll own it. As a young teenager, I was just selfish. I did not prioritize college. And I didn't prioritize college. I remember my dad, when I was going into 7th grade, we had went to the 7th grade like indoctrination I went to Granite Park Junior High School in South Salt Lake, Utah. And at that indoctrination, they were talking about what year I was going to graduate from high school and what I needed to start doing in junior high school to get access to college opportunities. And my dad basically tells me, hey, Gare, if you don't get straight A's and get scholarships, I don't know how you're going to college because I've got nothing for you. And I essentially decided in 7th grade that I wasn't going to college then because I was not going to get straight A's, and that was not the path I was going to take. The problem with that then is then all of a sudden I started to become less worried about school and education and future opportunities and more worried about reputation, socialization, and what I believed was my role in my neighborhood, right? 7th and 8th grade, I went to that one school, Ninth grade, I got shipped down to my grandma's house because I was acting like a jackwagon in middle school and junior high school. So my parents sent me to live with my grandma to try to reverse that course. I came back to Utah or to Salt Lake City after that year with my grandma, or 8 months, whatever it was with my grandma. Got all the way into the problems of my neighborhood again. As soon as I came back, barely made it through that first year of school. And then it was by that summer, the beginning of the second year, that they told me to go to that second school. And that then cascaded into a bunch of other challenges. Now, why that matters is because when I first left high school at 15, 16 years old, my little sister was about 11, right? 11, 12. And I not only left the high school, but I also eventually ended up moving out of my mom and dad's house because my dad was so upset with the choices that I was making as a young man that he basically told me one day, Gary, if you're not going to live by my rules, you can't live in this house anymore. And I just said, okay. And I packed my stuff and I literally moved down the street like 4 houses. So I don't know what I would do as a dad if my 16-year-old son, who was just ruining his life at a high rate of speed, packed up his stuff and moved 4 houses away. That would be just hard. Of course, I don't think I would ever tell my son that he had to get out at 16. I just don't know what I would do. I don't know what I would do. I don't know what I would do. I don't blame my dad. God bless him for trying. I mean, I remember the summer between 7th and 8th grade. I think it was the summer between 7th and 8th grade. No, between 8th and 9th grade. Summer between 8th and 9th grade. I was getting in so much trouble at home. My dad worked on the graveyard shift, right? He worked in the graveyard shift of the VA hospital. Every night he was going to work at 7 at night until 7 in the morning. And then he was going to college from 7 in the morning until around noon. Then he would come back home, get 4 or 5 hours sleep, do it again. And my mom was afraid of me at the age of 13, 14 years old. My dad would leave for work and my mom would take my little sister and she would lock them up in the room in her bedroom, and basically just because I guess I used to just be a menace. I just used to be bad. I guess I just remember her doing that, and I remember that I would just leave, and then my dad deciding that he was going to make me go with him to work after that started happening. So for a whole summer, I was essentially going with my dad every night to the emergency room at the VA hospital and just sitting there with him all night long, right? And I remember he taught me how to drive the golf carts at the hospital, and then they were letting me run errands, and I wrecked the golf cart, and my dad got in a lot of trouble for that. And of course, that ended me going to the VA hospital. And once again, I was a brat, I was an ignorant little young man, and my dad was doing what he was trying to do the best that he could do to figure out ways to keep me on the right track. And I say all this because for me, as I look back on my life and I look at my little sister, I only wonder what she was thinking about me as her older brother as she was growing up, right? When I ended up moving out of my parents' house around 16, my parents, and I moved four houses down, my parents sold their home and moved, right? They literally sold their home and moved because they blamed the neighborhood that I grew up in as being a major contributing factor as to what I was becoming as a young man. There may be something to say for that, right? Because my neighborhood is pretty tough. If you ask anybody from Salt Lake, you talk to them about South Salt Lake, 33rd South, right? They're going to tell you that there was, especially in the 90s, it was a challenge, right? But then there was also plenty of people in my area doing amazing things, right? That were just fine. I was just struggling. I was the boy that went from I was a Boy Scout, and in sixth and seventh grade, I was so heavily involved in scouting that I almost got my Eagle Scout before I even got to eighth grade. And then in eighth grade, I just took a detour. Stopped scouting, stopped worrying about. I got all the way into my neighborhood, into my friends groups, and it just got worse and worse and worse and worse, right? And so my parents, they moved down to Utah County. They moved down to actually live with my grandma again. My grandfather had passed away when I was in seventh grade, and my grandma was alone. And my dad just decided that was a good place to go live while they figured out uh, what they were going to do next. And my dad had got the chance to transfer to a VA clinic down in Utah County, which is about 45 minutes south of Salt Lake. And so they left. Then I'd say after about 7 months, I got the chance to go live with my aunt and my uncle up in Ogden, Utah, well, Clinton, and I went to school up there, but got in trouble at that school. Just I didn't even do anything wrong. It was just they found out who I was, and they didn't want me in their school, and that put me out. Right? Just as soon as they looked my name up, they said no, he can't be here. He doesn't belong in our school. So they got rid of me. I ended up going back down to live with my mom and my dad and my grandma for a period of time. Went to a high school down there, got arrested, got taken out of that school, and it's just horrible, man. I was just putting my parents through it. And again, I'm sure my little sister, again, she's growing up, she's seeing her older brother go through all these things, and Kristi and I, we were very close as kids. We were. We loved each other a ton. And we both knew we were adopted. We both felt connected that way. Uh, of course, we're siblings, so we're going to not always get along. But I will tell you, as kids that moved around a lot, there was a lot of times that we were each other's best friends. And when I look at my sons, who are 6 years apart, I can see the correlation, right, between siblings. And we didn't have any other brothers or sisters. It was just her and I. But then with me leaving the first time at such a young age, her being only 11 years old, and me just being so wild and so crazy and so out doing wild things, I'll never really understand how that might have affected her opinion of me, right? And that matters because uh, I essentially would live with my parents, sporadically between that first moving out of 15 up until I did eventually join the United States Navy at 19 years old, right? And so at 19 years old, I ship off to the Navy, and Kristi is about 15 years old. I'm on my first ship, the USS Bellawood. I'm over in Sasebo, Japan. My sister, and we're actually in Thailand. I remember we're in Thailand. I called home from Thailand, and my mom tells me that my sister is pregnant, right? And that she's going to have a baby. So here is my mom and dad having had their oldest son just be a freaking hellraiser. And they were so thankful I joined the military. My parents were so grateful I was able to get a job with the United States Navy. And thank God. Thank God I was able to pass the GED. Thank God they approved all my waivers. Thank God they had a spot for me. That changed my whole life. And I give all that credit to God. And my aunt Sandy's the one that drove me to the recruiting station, right? And someday I'll tell that story. But I thank God that I was able to join the military and not get kicked out my first 3 years, because I was wild. Me and my friends were wild. Very, very fortunate. But we were in Thailand, and I had called home. I hadn't even been in the Navy a year yet, and my sister was having a baby, right? And I remember just being, at that point in my life, I might have even been proud, right? Like I was a wild young person, and I'm just like, well, we'll figure it out, right? I'm proud of her for keeping her baby. I'm proud of. I mean, we'll figure it out. I remember I didn't get to go home on leave until after the baby was born, right? So I had left home with a 14, 15-year-old sister, came back, and she was a mom, had a baby. They were all living with my parents, right? I remember on this leave, her and the baby's father were fighting, right? Literally, there was a moment during this leave where my sister and I are chasing her baby's dad in a car. He's in a car with two other people, and I'm like trying to get my hands on this guy, right? Because in my mind, he's done my sister wrong, and she's told me all the reasons that he's not been doing her right. And I have a reputation to uphold, number one, right? That's a big piece of this, because even where my sister was living at this point in time, the people there knew me from when I lived with my grandma, or just from the time that I lived with my parents off and on, or then from my sister talking about me. So I had this perceived reputation that I had to uphold, whether I was in the Navy or not, didn't matter, right? I was that guy. And then secondly, you're not going to treat my sister some type of way, and I'm not going to do nothing about it. But that was just how our relationship was at that moment in time, right? And I remember telling my sister, like, hey, I'm gonna have to get out of the Navy and come home and take care of you and your baby, because it's not fair to mom and dad to have to raise your kid, but I'm not just gonna leave you alone with this dude, right? And we're talking about that, and I'm gonna get out of the Navy. And then it goes by about another year and a half, and it comes time for me to start getting out of the Navy. And she and this guy, the same guy, they had reconnected. They'd figured out their problems. So I felt a little bit betrayed, because I'm like, you had me, taking penitentiary chances. I was making a risk on leave to help you do something to this person that I thought this was done. Now y'all are back together again, having a kid, a second kid. Okay. Now I felt betrayed, and her and I did not get along over that next challenge, right? Because I felt like you're living with mom and dad. You guys are having another kid. Mom and dad should not be responsible for taking care of your kids, taking care of you, him. What the hell are we doing? And she was just, get out of my life. And we did not get along. I'll put it to you like that. I went home on leave again, and on that time, I made it a point to just stay away from my sister, her family, and everything she had going on. And she made sure she was nowhere around when I got into town, because she didn't want to have any problems with her person, her husband, her baby's father, or me, right? Which there would have been, because I was still just not adult. I was not mature. And I did the vacation, did the leave time with my parents. And I just remember my parents they were exhausted, they were sad, they were worried. They had these two granddaughters they loved my little sister, they loved me. I was talking about getting out of the Navy, and my parents were nervous that if I came back home, it was going to be friction all the time. I was nervous about that too. But what were we going to do? I wasn't sure. I ended up going back to the Navy to do my last, year. And it was during that last year that I ended up deciding to stay in the Navy. I got offered the chance to be a United States Navy recruiter, and I got the chance to go be a recruiter in Clearwater, Florida. I called my parents up and said, hey, what do you think? I got the chance to stay in the Navy longer. My parents said, yes, do that. Do not get out. Do not come home. I'm only a third-class petty officer at this time, y'all. Like I was good in the Navy. I was a good engineer. I was a great watchstander. I was good at fixing things. Was not a good sailor. Why did they pick me to go be a Navy recruiter? Number one, I had earned my ESWAS pen, so I had earned my enlisted surface warfare specialist pen. Two, the Navy was doing a new program where they were offering third-class petty officers to go be recruiters, and 3, they had come down to my ship and watched me train people on firefighting. I was a DC-3, and my charisma, my ability to teach, a lot of the things that made me a successful team leader, that made me a successful sailor, were skills that they recognized would make me a successful Navy recruiter. And they were right. Like, they were right. Recruiting was a phenomenal tour, changed my life, and it unlocked a lot of my God-given abilities that I was in denial of before that period, right? Because I was just more focused on being kind of a problem, vice being the best human being I could be. And this is an important part of my story, my journey, because on the way from the USS Bellawood, I left the Bellawood the day the USS, I think it was Bonhomme Richard or Essex, one of those two, came into town to relieve them forward deployed. That's the day I left the ship. So I was on Bellawood the whole time in Japan. I went home on leave to Utah for 30 days before I went to recruiting school in Pensacola, Florida. And we were in Utah, and there was a girl living with my parents at the time who was a childhood friend of my little sister. My sister was not there. Once again, she is gone. She is not around. Her husband is not around. Their 2 kids are not around because she is worried that there's going to be a problem with me because I'm in town. We go up to my aunt's house on 4th of July, and the girl calls my mom and dad, the girl that's living with my parents. And she says, "Hey, your daughter, Kristi, is here at your house." And she's in the house. And my mom, I remember my mom being on the phone, like, "Why did you let her in?" And at this point in time, they're not living there, right? The girl tells my mom that my sister and her husband are going through my things. Not sure what's going on there. And I'm just like, well, we need to go home because all I've got is everything at your house. We get back down to my parents' house about 2 hours later because it's a drive. And mind you, we leave a family gathering to get back down to my mom and dad's house. And my sister and her husband had basically taken all of my jewelry that I wasn't wearing, right? So I had accrued multiple watches while I was overseas, bracelets, necklaces, stuff that I'd got from Bahrain, stuff that I got from Japan, things that I had thought had value. They took it. They took it. She literally robbed me, right? She stole my stuff. And I was very upset, right? I was very upset. Matter of fact, I reached out to a few old friends, and I got on the phone with my sister. I don't even remember how I got on the phone. This is like 2000, right? This is the summer of 2000, July of 2000. And I got on the phone with my sister. And I said, basically, bring my stuff back, or there's going to be long-term problems for people. And if you don't bring it back, I know where people that your family cares about live, and it's just going to be a problem, right? And that was what my intention was. My intention was to exact some sort of retribution for this offense, right? For them robbing me. And I was going to make the papers, right? I was going to do something tragic. And my sister basically just said, "You're not going to catch us. You're not going to do anything. We're leaving." Boom. So I remember that afternoon, I had already put plans into motion. People were coming to get me, and I was going to go make some bad life choices. And my dad, God bless my dad. My dad says, "Garrett, you do not need to do something stupid here. I'm sorry she robbed you. You're going to go be a recruiter. You're still in the military. You got to not do this." And I remember telling my dad, like, what else do I do? Like, what else do I do? Right? They just came and violated us, me, you, everybody, and our whole family. What would a regular person do? Because mind you, I didn't know how to be a regular person, a regular adult. I went from being kind of a problem in my neighborhood to joining the military, going to boot camp, and shipping overseas to Japan. And we were kind of wild in Japan, 97 to 2000. I'm not going to lie to y'all. We were kind of wild, right? This was before the internet really hit. I got my first email account during this period of time. We were living it was a fun lifestyle. I'm not going to lie to y'all, but I had not matured appropriately for like civilization. I was very indoctrinated into Japan. I knew how to operate with Cinderella Liberty. I knew how to stay out of trouble there. But now here I am in the States, and I've got a lot of independence, and I was not known for being a very law-abiding citizen yet. I just was not there in my life. I had not grown up. And my dad was just like, Gary, you need to not do something stupid here and ruin your whole life. And I said, what does a normal person do? And my dad says a normal person calls the police. That's what he tells me. He said they call the cops. Here's what he said. He said they call the cops. And I think he even said, I'm going to call the cops on you if you go do something. And I just remember thinking like, they call the cops. That's what they do. And that's what we did, right? That's what we did. I turned off my friends. I've got some friends even to this day that are just amazing people, and they would 1,000% cover down for me, but I turned that off, and I was able to, with my dad, contact the authorities, file the complaints, right? Which, you know what's so interesting about this part of the story is that when I get to Clearwater, Florida, to buy my first car after coming back from Japan, I have warrants for my arrest in Utah that I have to fly back and resolve. But I don't understand why this doesn't come up at this point in time when I'm filing this complaint against my sister. I don't know, maybe it was because the warrants for my arrest were from, I think they were unpaid debt. I don't know, remember what they were from. I had to just pay money and they were gone. So it wasn't like I was freaking some crazy, some crazy highly wanted person. I just had probably not paid traffic tickets or something like that. I don't even remember anymore. But I just remember we're putting in the paperwork with my parents, and I remember the law enforcement officer knew who I was from before I had joined the Navy, and even he was like caught off guard that I was calling him. And he knew my little sister too. Like, they knew who I was, they knew who my little sister was, and they began their investigation, right? A week or two goes by, and I think at that time my little sister was living like in southern Utah. I didn't go looking for her. I just let it go, moved out to Florida, and met Erica, changed my life, and everything completely, recruiting duty completely changed my life. That's where I fell in love with my wife. That's where I started my family. That's where I invested. That's when I decided to go ahead and focus on the United States Navy all the way. That's when I completely went all into becoming the human being that I am, that I have been blessed to become, right? But that moment, that time when my sister robbed me, that was a pivotal point, because that's when I recognized, like, I'm no longer just going to be an outlaw. I have got to be a person that chooses to follow the law of the land, right? And as time goes by, they arrest my sister. I think they arrest her husband. They get stuff back that they pawned, right? Because that's what they did. They went and pawned my stuff for money. They get some of that stuff back that they pawned, some of that they never got back, whatever, right? To this day, you know what's funny about to this day, I almost wear like no jewelry. Like, I don't care about jewelry anymore. That was me when I was younger. But I think it was after I got robbed that I started being like, well, what good is having things that people can just take, right? I would much rather have things that are harder for people to take for value. But that was, I spent more money, I think, on jewelry my first 3 years in the Navy than I've spent since then, just being honest. But that was a huge pivotal block between me and my sister. When I got married, and so I met Erica, March 2001, right? So I get to uh, Clearwater, Florida, August of 2000, right? And 7 months later, I meet Erica March 2001. Another year later, March 2002, and Erica and I are getting married. And my mom and my dad flew out for the wedding, and they brought my sister's two children with them because they were raising my sister's children. My sister had lost custody of her children to the point that my parents were raising them full time, that they had to the point they had to bring them to Florida to come to my wedding, or they would not have been able to attend my wedding. And I remember being so frustrated by that because I'm just like, I would like for you guys to come to Florida and be able to go do fun things and go do something with me and my wife, and us not have to care for, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old child. Oh, by the way, I'm living in a 2-bedroom apartment, right? Not even though it was a 1-bedroom apartment is where I'm living at. And my parents were going to stay with me. So I was going to have me, my new wife, my mom and my dad, and these 2 little kids. But that was the status of how things were going, unfortunately, for my sister. So they came. They came. We had a lot of fun. We went to Disney. We made it. We made it work, right? We got through that period of time. I then, after recruiting duty, I got orders to go to San Diego because I wanted to be closer to my parents, because I felt like they were getting older. I'd been gone for a lot. I didn't want to go to Virginia, and Erica and I wanted to go somewhere different, so we got orders to go to San Diego. Get to San Diego. I'm on the USS Ogden, which is another godsend. I was born in Ogden, Utah. So when I was looking for orders and the ship, the USS Ogden, was available, which was named for the place I was born, I just felt like it was a sign, which it was an amazing tour. I'll have to do a video on the USS Ogden someday. Amazing tour for me. I was on that ship almost 4 years. I decommissioned the USS Ogden. But the point of this story is we moved to San Diego to be closer to my mom and my dad. Erica and I drove from Florida to Utah. And when we came through Utah, we passed through where my parents lived. And of course, my sister, she was nowhere to be found. At that time, she was no longer married to the first guy who she had 2 kids with. And I think she'd had her 3rd child, and or she was pregnant with a 3rd child, something along those lines. She does have 3 daughters eventually. And it's about that time. I think she's in that new relationship, but she's having a 3rd child. But she's nowhere around when I come to town with Erica. And this is the first time Erica ever comes to Utah to visit my side of the family. So like my cousins and my aunts and whatever it is. That 3rd child's not there yet, because I ended up going to Japan next. So anyway, go there, no Kristi. I'm down in San Diego. Erica gets pregnant with Hayden 2007, and I think it's 2007. I reach out to my sister, and I said, hey, look, this is 2004. I said, it's mom and dad's anniversary. I know you and I don't get along. I can put, a lot of stuff in the past. I would like to do an anniversary party for them. And maybe while I'm in town, we can go get family pictures done with you, your daughters, Erica, me, mom, and dad. So they will have pictures of their whole family. And she says, okay. So I coordinate with her to do this event. Erica and I drive up from San Diego to Utah, and it's a 9-10-hour drive. We drive up, we do the event, which is the first time I'd seen my little sister in person since I joined the Navy. No, since I'd been chasing her baby daddy on leave that one time. So probably 1998, 99, and now we're like 2004 time frame, right? That's the first time I saw her in person. That's a Saturday. We have this event. The pictures are supposed to be the next day on Sunday because after the pictures, Erica and I are heading back down to San Diego because I'm going back to work on Monday, right? And we go to the picture place the next day. It's like Walmart pictures. And my mom and my dad show up with the two little girls. And I'm like, well, where's Kristi? And my parents said, she's going to Vegas to be a witness for somebody else's wedding, right? So I just super frustrated, super annoyed. She could not show up and give my parents a 30-minute photo op so they could have a picture of all their family, and she was on her way down to Vegas. All right, roger that. We did the picture, right? It was up in my parents' living room until the day that they died. And that was the most my sister ever met my wife was during that visit, during that one event, right? And that experience. Most of you know that we came back in 2006 for Erica's baby shower for Hayden that my cousin Gwen put on. My sister was nowhere around for that baby shower. She didn't want to come. I didn't want her to come, whatever, right? Now flash forward several years later, right? And it's 2013, right? 2013, I believe, is when my sister is going to pass away. Let me get that date. Yeah, March 16th, 2013. Erica and I, we were still, at this point, we're in Japan, right? We left San Diego in 2010. I never saw my sister any of that time. My parents would come down to visit us in San Diego, and they would it was like pulling teeth for them not to bring those kids with them because they were raising their granddaughters pound for pound, day for day. Erica and I moved to Yokosuka, Japan, and Hayden moved to Yokosuka, Japan 2010, and we're there through 2013. I got flown back to San Diego to go watch a damage control training event aboard an aircraft carrier in San Diego. And this is an important moment for me because as I'm there in San Diego watching this aircraft carrier training event, talking with my parents, but I have no plans on going to Utah. My intention was get back to Japan as soon as possible. I'm on the USS George Washington. We're getting ready to go to sea again. And I'm getting they're changing the carrier training readiness standards. And so I'm there getting some intel. I do the week in San Diego, which is great. Get to see a lot of old friends, a lot of reconnects. But now I'm in the airport preparing to board my plane to go back to Japan. And I am literally in the line. They are boarding. I am in the line with my ticket and they are boarding. And for some reason, for whatever the reason, I'm not quite sure, but I checked my cell phone and I checked Facebook. And this is 2013, Facebook. And my Aunt Susie posts on Facebook for everybody to pray for my sister and for my parents because my sister had been found unresponsive in her home and that she was going to the hospital. So I see that message and I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck's going on? I step out of line. I call Utah and I get a hold of, I believe, my mom, and she's just a wreck. She's crying and her daughter is in a bad, bad way. And I remember she has 3 daughters. My sister has 3 daughters at this point. And I guess her youngest daughter had found her in the house. And and her trailer park and their home that they were living in. The older two daughters no longer lived with my parents or with my sister. They now lived with their father, who had gotten his life together. He had gotten a whole new family. He had joined the United States Air Force. He was doing very good, actually, for himself. And him and I eventually got to a place where, actually, over this period of time, we shook hands and called it good, right? Because I was happy that he was not leaving his daughters with my parents anymore. But that broke my parents' heart. My parents, they love those little girls so much. And so when they lost them to have to go live with their dad, which was the right thing, that really rocked them. But they did have the younger daughter or the younger granddaughter with them. And she's like 7 or 8 at this time. I call my mom, she's crying, and I tell my mom and my dad, I say, look, I'm gonna do what I can, but I'm gonna be on my way. And they were very, very, it was a blessing that I was stateside and that I was, 9 hours away from being home. I called my wife using the Magic Jack app right on my cell phone. She was able to wake up my LCPO, Mike Piazza, who I did a podcast with many, 2 seasons ago. She wakes up Mike and basically says, hey, Mike, Gary's sister is currently in the hospital and it doesn't look good. Can he go on leave? He verbally authorizes the leave, and I get up to Utah. Book a couple flights, get a couple cars, I get there. By the time I get there, my sister unfortunately has been placed on life support, right? She unfortunately was just putting things in her body she didn't need to be putting in her body for whatever her reasons, and it just didn't work out. Now, this is the first time I'd seen my sister since 2004. Mind you, we really didn't talk a whole bunch. I joined the Navy in 1997. I saw her 98, 99. Saw her again for my parents' anniversary day in like 04. And any other time we'd ever spoken, it had pretty much been yelling at each other over the phone, and really just me being frustrated for my parents because they were essentially paying for her and for her kids, right? And so then when I come in the room with my dad, she's on, life support. And they had kept her there, my dad said, long enough for me to get there so I could say my goodbyes. And in my goodbyes, what do you say, right? What do you say? What do you say? This is a person that my first 15 years of life, we were very close. And then I started making choices that drew me farther away from the family. And then I joined the service, and then away that I went. And the human being that I was looking at on this bed, while I could recognize her, I didn't know her. But I will tell you that I believe God played a role in my timeline because he knew my parents was going to need me to be there to help them put together their affairs, right? Help them clean out her things, help them to put together their life after their daughter passed away, which the majority of my parents' life was taking care of their daughter and her granddaughter. The granddaughter goes to live with my mom and dad, right? They ended up raising her from that age until she was 18 years old. Literally, my mom passes away when the granddaughter's about 16, and my dad passes away a week after the granddaughter's 18 years old. And one of the conversations my dad and I had was he got her over 18 before he passed away. But they took on that responsibility as soon as my sister passed away, right? They took that on because that might as well have been their daughter, right? And God bless them for it. I mean, I was always disappointed because I have 2 sons who never really got to know their grandparents because my parents never could afford to really do much because they were always raising other people's kids. But it's a complicated thing. Life is a complicated thing, right? And I used to ask my dad, how do you have such never-ending patience and grace? But now as a 48-year-old man, I hope I could one day maybe be that level of supporting, because I know God is always there for me in that regard, right? And I think that my dad was doing his best to live as Christ-like as he could live. And my mom struggled. She struggled, but she loved those girls. And she just wanted the best for those girls. Even though her and my sister had challenges, my dad was always the strength in that relationship. And when he passed away, he told me, he said, Gary, do you care if I leave all this stuff to her? And I said, I don't mind. Like, at the end of the day, I mean, it hurt. Don't get me wrong, it hurt. All I asked for was pictures, which is what I got. I got the chance to take pictures from my childhood, me and my sister, when we were children, the things that I wanted to remember, right? But when it came to earthly things, I don't need those things. My sons are fine. We're going to be okay. But unfortunately, I come from a place where I had a sister who unfortunately passed away due to a drug overdose, right? Let's just call it is what it is. She was just making bad life choices. And I know she didn't mean to die. I mean, her daughter was in the other room, right? She just probably thought she was going to go get high real quick and then continue on with her day. And her body just couldn't take it anymore. But this is a part of the layering of me that adds to my ability to connect with people as I go through life, because this is something that I have in my background that helps me to communicate. It helps me to understand people. Thank God for my Chiefs Mess family, because when my sister died, my parents had no money for the funeral. None. No, there's no life insurance, no planning, no nothing. And it is 2013. I'm in the USS George Washington, and I'm telling my wife, like, look, I'm going to swipe the credit card to pay for this funeral that's going to be like $4,500 or whatever it was, right? And my wife was supportive, but she said, hey, why don't we try this GoFundMe thing and see if that can possibly help us to raise some money. And I had never even heard of anything like that before. And so we started a GoFundMe, and we raised all the money we needed to raise. And I will tell you, a significant portion of that money came from the Chiefs Mess, from my Navy peers, from my Navy family that just knew my family needed help. And I will tell you, eventually I'll tell the story about when my mom passes away and how the Navy Chiefs Mess helps me in that moment as well, because they came out and they did an amazing thing for my family. But it was just, once again, my Navy family proving they could support me and my family back in Utah as we came through this very difficult time. My heart goes out to anyone out there in the world that's ever lost a family member from drug abuse, from, just dying before they were supposed to, or that has tough relationships with their family members. I tried with my sister. I'm pretty comfortable in saying that. Could I have done more? Sure. But I remember when she made that choice to not be in that family photo and to go to Las Vegas, that was when I really just kind of said, you know what? I'm going to do my best to not let my blood pressure get up, but we're not friends. And sometimes it's just like that, right? You don't have to be friends with family when you get older, especially if it's unhealthy for you. And it was unhealthy for me, right? But then try your best to support your family members that are in good relationships with them, because I was at times not very nice to my parents, even as an adult. And I think it was out of jealousy, because I wanted my parents to be more present for my children, and they just never could. They couldn't afford to do it, and they were always strapped down taking care of these little girls that they felt like been given the blessing and the responsibility of raising. Thank you very much if you listened to my story today. When I look at this story, I see God, for me, being there for me and my mom and my dad. I see consequences that happen in life, and sometimes they're going to come, and there's not always an answer. I will tell you that, my mom and dad were able to raise the youngest granddaughter, get her to over 18 years old before they passed away. And in my mind, that's a they were good and faithful servants, and they did their best to take care of that responsibility. And then they were able to go back home and to be with God. I hope that they're with me as I'm telling this story. I hope that, I have no ill will towards my little sister. I do look forward to one day hopefully reconnecting with her in the future, in the next life, and maybe we can just, I'm sure we'll be just fine. We made our peace that day when she was in the hospital bed. And, I pray that anyone out there that's going through challenging things can hopefully have the important conversations that you need to have as you figure out life. Thank you all very much for supporting the Words from the Wise podcast. I am Gary Wise. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me. If you have any questions, or if you'd like to know more information about anything with the story, please hit me up, and I will talk to y'all later. Thank you. Bye.